This material is a motivational script designed to validate a listener's past struggles as the necessary foundational preparation for an impending, highly aligned phase of life called their winning era. And while the piece is deeply empathetic and emotionally evocative, our goal today is to elevate its impact through actionable refinements.
Right. Getting straight to it.
Yeah, before we get into the weeds, I do want to establish that this is a potent script. It has a clear, comforting voice aimed at a weary but resilient audience. Our tone today is calibrated to respect that intent while strictly focusing on sharpening the real-world impact. So let's look closely at the section discussing the universe and synchronicities.
I found that entire segment fascinating. It's clearly attempting to lift the audience out of their immediate heavy struggles.
Yeah.
By introducing this much grander, almost cosmic perspective on their daily lives. You can really feel the author stretching to make the reader feel special and chosen.
The script leans heavily on abstract motivational language that risks floating away from the listener's lived reality.
Floating away. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, because the weakness here is this immense reliance on broad, esoteric concepts. You've got phrases like vibrational frequencies, reality rearranging itself.
Universal alignment.
Exactly. But the text doesn't sufficiently tether these massive phenomena to tangible, real-world actions or scenarios. Because the piece stays hovering at this very high atmospheric level of spiritual and motivational theory, it ends up avoiding the messy physical realities of the listener's actual day-to-day life.
That's clearly laid out. I wonder, though, if we've considered how grounding these ethereal concepts in mundane reality might actually make the magic feel more real.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I can imagine a writer worrying that if they start talking about, say, paying bills or traffic, it completely shatters that high vibrational spell they are trying to cast over the audience.
It's a totally valid fear, but the reality is actually the opposite. The suggestion here is to ground the abstract, spiritual or motivational promises in highly specific, relatable examples of everyday human choices and physical realities.
Right. Because an over-reliance on the abstract makes a deeply personal message feel slightly generic.
Or elusive to a pragmatic listener. Imagine someone navigating very ordinary, unglamorous problems. If I'm stressed about a looming performance review or a toxic roommate, shifting my frequency means absolutely nothing to me unless you show me what that shift looks like in my living room.
Ah, I see what you mean. When a script only speaks in the language of the universe and shifting energies, it inadvertently demands that the audience do all the heavy lifting of translation.
Yes.
The listener has to pause the audio or stop reading to figure out what a synchronicity actually means for their specific, stressful Tuesday morning commute.
And that is a massive cognitive load to place on someone who is already coming to this material feeling weary. If you want to make the magic feel real, you have to anchor it to the pavement. Show the listener that this winning era isn't just a pleasant daydream to escape into, but a highly practical state of operating in the real world.
Let's workshop that. What might that look like in practice? If we want to give the audience a few concrete examples of how to bring this down to earth, where would we inject them?
Okay, let's take the exact moment where the text says you'll turn down opportunities that look good on paper.
Good line.
It is a good line, but right now that's just a nice idea. To give it teeth, the author should specify what that actually looks like in practice. For instance, right after that phrase, add something like, that means turning down a high-paying promotion because the company culture demands 80-hour weeks.
Oh, I like that.
Right? You finally value your nervous system more than your title?
That completely changes the texture of the paragraph. By adding that specific, recognizable corporate scenario, the concept of alignment suddenly has a very clear, recognizable face. It's no longer just a cosmic reward. It's a terrifying, incredibly real choice you have to make on a Tuesday afternoon in your boss's office.
Exactly. It forces the abstract into the experiential.
Building on that point, what if we looked at it from the perspective of the social dynamics the text brings up? There's a section discussing walking away from relationships that once seemed necessary. How do we pull that out of the clouds?
We ground it with the specific scenario. The author could append a line like, walking away from a decade-long friendship group because you realize your only common bond is complaining.
And you refuse to spend another Friday night draining your energy at the same corner table.
Yes, the Friday night corner table. That specific imagery is brilliant because it takes the abstract idea of protecting your peace and places it in a room the listener has actually sat in.
They can smell a stale beer. They can hear the overlapping complaints.
It proves to the listener that the author actually understands their life rather than just shouting motivational platitudes from a mountaintop.
It bridges the gap perfectly. When you make it actionable, you naturally increase the emotional weight of those choices, which actually brings up another observation about the emotional weight of this piece.
Go for it.
Well, there's a huge focus on survival.
Right. So a key theme running through this material seems to be this intense, relentless resilience. We see this through some very vivid, high-stakes image. The text talks about the listener being forged in circumstances that would have shattered most people, being built from rubble and acting as a plant out in the harsh elements.
The survival imagery is undeniably the emotional engine of the piece. It drives forward with an immense amount of passion, validating the sheer endurance of the listener. I actually found myself holding my breath reading through that section.
Because it just keeps hitting you with wave after wave of validation.
Exactly.
Which leads us to our next area of focus. The relentless emotional crescendo of the narrative creates a pacing that could inadvertently exhaust the listener rather than empower them.
Exhaust them?
Yes. The weakness is that the text operates at a near constant, high decibel intensity of validation and dramatic revelation. It strings together these incredibly weighty phrases, shattered, soul-crushing, pure essence, and it just never lets up.
It's like an action movie where the explosions start in minute 1 and don't stop until the credits roll.
And eventually, you just stop hearing the explosion. Because there are no valleys, no pauses, or tonal downshifts in the structure, the high-stakes metaphors begin to lose their individual impact. They start to blur into one long motivational shout.
Is there a risk that focusing solely on maintaining this high vibrational intensity might overlook the power of a quiet, reflective pause for the listener?
That is the exact risk.
Because when we consume audio or read a text that stays at that 10 out of 10, our nervous systems naturally start to tune it out to protect our energy. It's a biological response. It's the contrast, the drop in volume, a sudden quiet that actually makes the loud moments feel profound.
If everything is bolded, nothing is bold.
Right.
The suggestion here is to introduce structural breathing room and tonal variations to create contrast. You have to allow these profound statements to settle and resonate before moving to the next point.
Contrast really is a most underutilized tool in motivational writing. If we want the audience to feel the power of that resilience, we first have to let them feel the weight of their exhaustion. Let's look at some concrete examples of how we might implement these tonal downshifts.
Let's look at the metaphor about being a diamond.
Okay.
The text talks about being subjected to intense pressure and heat deep within the earth, surviving conditions that would crush anything else. It's huge, soaring imagery. But right after that, the text needs a quiet, conversational beat. The author can insert a short, understated sentence right there. Something incredibly simple, like, and honestly, probably just really tired.
Wow. I literally felt my shoulders drop just hearing you say that. It's so disarming.
It validates the physical exhaustion before ramping back up.
It acts as a necessary exhale. The listener doesn't have to be a superhero for just one sentence.
It creates a valley, and you can apply the same technique to the rapid-fire lists of what the listener survived. Later in the piece, the text lists every betrayal, every failure, every lonely night. It builds and builds.
So how do we break up that rapid-fire list without losing the emotional resonance?
With a brief, grounding question directed straight at the listener, right after that intense list, the author could drop in, take a breath. Do you realize how much weight that actually is?
That forces the pacing to halt entirely. It asks the audience to stop rushing toward the finish line of their healing and just stand still for a second to honor their own survival.
Pacing isn't just about the speed at which words are read. It's about the emotional demands placed on the audience. By weaving in these moments of quiet, ordinary validation, the soaring, triumphant sections of the material will land with much greater force.
They won't just be loud, they'll be earned.
Exactly. So we've grounded the abstract in reality, and we've paced the emotional delivery. That brings us to the climax of the actual call to action. As I understand it from the notes, the argument here is that the listener is fully ready to claim this era right now.
Yes.
The text focuses heavily on the final paragraphs where the listener is instructed to stop waiting for permission, stop explaining, and start executing, and set boundaries you've never had before.
It really pushes for immediate, unapologetic action. It essentially tells the audience that the waiting room is closed, and it is time to walk out into the world and enforce their new reality.
Here is the issue with that section. The transition from enduring past struggles to claiming future success lacks a clear acknowledgement of the practical friction involved in changing deeply ingrained habits.
The friction.
Right. The weakness is that the text commands the listener to immediately start executing, stop people-pleasing, and enforce boundaries, treating this massive behavioral shift as something that magically happens simply because of a mindset change. It completely ignores the visceral discomfort, guilt, and pushback that inevitably accompany setting boundaries for the first time.
That makes sense, but could the evidence also support a different conclusion, like the idea that taking action will initially feel like a massive step backwards in comfort?
Absolutely.
Because often motivational material sells the destination of a winning era as this place of absolute, unwavering confidence. But for a chronic people pleaser, saying no for the first time doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like a panic attack.
That's the exact danger here. If the text doesn't prepare them for that biological response, the sweating, the racing heart, the guilt, they might misinterpret their own anxiety as a sign that they're doing something wrong, or that they aren't truly aligned after all. They'll think, the script said I was ready, but I feel terrible. I must have failed.
So, how do we keep the empowerment without setting them up for a harsh reality check?
The suggestion is to acknowledge the messy, uncomfortable friction of transition, providing a realistic bridge between internal alignment and external execution so the listener doesn't feel like a failure when it's difficult.
Normalizing that friction is arguably the most compassionate thing a writer can do. It's like giving them a map that actually shows where the potholes are instead of just drawing a straight, smooth line to the destination.
Let's explore some concrete examples of how to inject this realism. When the text states your job is simply to protect what you've built, that means boundaries you've never had before, the author should explicitly address the difficulty. They could add a line like, setting that first boundary is going to feel terrible. Your voice might shake when you say no to someone you love. Your heart will race. Do it anyway.
I love the visceral nature of that. By explicitly naming the physical symptoms of the friction, the shaking voice, the racing heart, the text prepares the listener for the reality of the task. It recontextualizes their fear as proof of progress rather than evidence of failure.
Another excellent place to apply this is when the text discusses the social fallout. The script mentions that people are going to say you've changed, and they won't mean it as a compliment.
Which is a very astute observation from the author. It correctly identifies that this specific pushback will happen.
It is astute, but it stops short of telling the listener how to physically endure that specific, highly uncomfortable social moment. The author could add a brief instruction right there. When they say that, your old instinct will be to apologize and shrink back. Let the awkward silence hang there instead.
Let the silence hang. That gives the listener a specific behavioral anchor for a moment of high friction. Don't apologize. Don't explain. Just sit in the silence. It transforms the material from a purely theoretical pep talk into a functional field guide for personal evolution.
And when the text anticipates the pain points of growth, it establishes a much deeper, more durable trust with the audience.
That trust is what will ultimately make the listener return to this material time and time again.
Let's bring all of this together and recap the primary focuses of this critique. First, we looked at the esoteric language. We addressed the need to ground abstract motivational concepts into concrete reality,
taking it from the cosmos down to the Tuesday morning commute.
Second, we identified the necessity of pacing the emotional delivery. We need to introduce conversational valleys and tonal pauses to contrast the relentless, intense pacing.
Like simply telling the listener, you're probably just really tired, to break up the dramatic crescendo.
Finally, we explored the execution phase. We highlighted the importance of acknowledging the real-world friction of executing new boundaries.
To summarize the actionable steps, the author needs to inject highly specific, mundane examples into the abstract sections, add short conversational sentences that act as structural breathing room, and write a few lines validating the physical and social discomfort of sudden behavioral change.
Those structural adjustments will drastically elevate this piece. We warmly invite the listener to implement these structural and tonal shifts and submit the revised material back in for another round of feedback. Keep refining.